Today we're covering cold emails and how to get cold emails that convert like crazy. So yeah, basically we have the breakdown, as Jaime said, more structure to it these days. And yeah, let's get straight into it.
Guys, drop a 1 if everything is good, audio is good. You guys can hear us perfectly, and if you're excited for this.
Awesome. So let's start with a request that we actually got quite a bit from when we posted what people wanted to know about. And something that came up quite a bit was video audits and looms in general. So yeah, firstly, when it comes to making a loom and sending a video audit to clients or to prospects, what are the key points you would say that are really essential for you to be hitting there?
Yeah. So I mean, there's two different type of looms that we utilize in video audits, right? There's two different types, and one is a broad one, okay, which is a niche specific loom, where it can be scaled because it applies for a specific niche within e-commerce, right? And we can use that as a follow-up, very effective follow-up, right? Or we can have a personalized video audit, okay? A personalized video audit is completely different, right? Because that video is personalized. Now, when do we send these personalized video audits as opposed to the general one? When they actually show interest in that personalized video audit, okay? That is how you invest time correctly in the right things, right? Because otherwise, guys, I've probably sent out, well, 100%, and I have a video on this on my channel. I've sent out at this point well over 400 video audits. Okay, that's a lot of video audits, and I've learned quite a few things. And I've also had a lot of video audits not watched when I was starting out, and it hurts. And that's why I have this approach where I have two different types of video audits, and one is more broad and it applies as it's an amazing follow-up for an email series, and the other one is more personalized. What are the key points to cover? I mean, it really depends, right? It really depends what type of service you're offering. But the main thing that you want to realize is the fact that prospects, the thing about selling a service, the thing about selling anything is people can either move out of inspiration or out of desperation, right? And so what I've seen attracts most prospects is when you have the comparison element. And the comparison element is useful for two main reasons, right? Number one, because we tend to move more out of desperation than inspiration, right? So when they see that, hey, like someone else is implementing this, like I got to implement this, it's much more powerful, right? But also when they have context as to how it's being done by someone else, then they can actually see that it's doable, right? When you stay in the theory and, hey, you could do this, or you could do that, or you could do, you should be doing this, right? But you don't give them concrete examples of this being done by someone in their space, that video audit is not going to be as effective, right? And so I've come to realize that comparison element is really important. Now, can you talk about specific set of proven strategies that they can implement? 100%. But make sure that you at least at one point during the video audit have that comparison element where you compare them to a specific competitor in their space. That's going to be very effective, and it's going to show them that, hey, like you actually know about their space, right? And so even just without you saying, being an expert at the strategies, just by you having that awareness of their specific space, that's going to put you miles ahead of the competition. So very, very powerful stuff.
Awesome. No, I think you covered a lot there. And since you did cover a lot, and since there is so much that you can talk about, right, when it comes to these video audits, how long would you say that they actually should be, and like how in depth are you going for these?
I mean, here's one trap that you don't want to fall into, and that I definitely fall into even to this day, right? With everything that I do, is kind of like this imposter syndrome where you think like you need to you'd be hitting 1,000 different points and having insanely in-depth video audits, right? And look, I've tried pretty much everything. I've had video audits that went for 30 minutes, right? And I would literally do like 4 or 5 of those a day, right? So 30 minutes each, just going at it, right? And that did get some results, but it wasn't the most optimal, right? Simply because most business owners, quite frankly, don't have that amount of time. So the main, I mean, how long? I'm always hesitant to give like specific answers, but because it might be different, regarding your niche and regarding your service. But for a personalized video audit, I would say between 5-7 minutes. That's a really good place to be hitting it. And for general, maybe 4-6 minutes, 4-7 minutes. Obviously you can go up to 10, right? And it's not so much about the time length, but how valuable is it, right? And so there's no point in stalking without actually providing value. There's literally no point, right? And so if you can say it in the most concise manner, really. But that's kind of the sweet spot that I've personally seen.
Awesome. And I mean, when it comes to the end, right? So like we've gone through, we've spoken for 5 to 7 minutes, or the 4 to 6 if it's a general one. Then what? Right? Like you're dropping all this value, you're giving them all these tips, you're showing them, either the inspiration or the desperation, which is usually the case. And then what's the call to action? What are we asking for at the end?
Yeah. So I mean, one of the key things that people need to understand when it comes to B2B sales and high ticket sales is that any type of hard close is actually gonna it's actually more detrimental than anything else, right? Like you want to make sure that they're almost begging for the close themselves, right? And so at the same time, you also don't want to get caught in just being value based and not asking for the close, right? And so you need to get that balance of like having a very clear close, but being very kind of like very hands off and very non-pushy with the close. And so, I mean, typically, and it really depends on what funnel we've got in place, right? We talk about this in the mentorship, but typically what I shoot for with the personalized video audits is I'll go straight into a strategy session where the next step after the strategy session is a deal, right? And so that strategy session may be 2-3 parts, okay? But the next step would be the deal. And I'll tell them, like, I'll be very straight up, like, what's the catch? What's the catch of this video audit? Well, the catch, right? You want to dispel the catch. Well, the catch is, look, a lot of people watch this video audit and they want to learn more, right? They want to know more about how we can do this for you. And then you want to build the no obligation element, right? Look, no obligation, no string attached. No matter what happens, like you're going to get a value out of this strategy session, because if you got value out of a 7-minute video audit, like this just takes it to a whole new level, right? And look, if it's not a good fit, we part ways, no hard feelings, right? So you want to play with that, like building the clear value, making it very compelling for them to jump on that goal, but then also kind of like being very hands off and giving them that space for saying no, like almost chasing the no, right? And that's kind of something that I've talked about extensively on my channel on the mentorship is to a whole new level, right? Where like you almost want to chase the no, because then they're like, oh shit, like this person doesn't really need this, right? And this person is very fine giving away this value, right? The final thing that I'll say on that, because I like to rant, but the final thing that I'll say is that on that is that final thing that I just said has proven to work very effectively, right? Dispelling the catch. Whenever you're providing free value, people are always kind of skeptical. Like, why is this person doing this, right? And so you want to address that as soon as possible, right? You want to dispel the catch right off the bat on that video. Like, hey, here's why I'm doing this, right? Because at the end, right, a lot of people see so much value in this video audits, they're like, I want to learn more. And there's an obligation, no strings attached goal, right? So when you dispel that catch right from the bat, they're not kind of like guessing as to what is in it for you, right? And that transparency, prospects and really anyone in life, they appreciate that.
Definitely. No, I think that's some fire tips to get you guys started on the looms, or if you're already started and not seeing results, some real actionable stuff you can take with you. The next thing that we wanted to cover today is the subject lines, right? So, when it comes to sending emails, the first thing someone's going to see is the subject line, and it's going to really say to them whether they're going to be interested in opening this, or whether they're just going to bin it and put it with the rest of their junk, right? So, when it comes to subject lines, is there anything general that you want to say before? I think we've already touched on this in the past, but today we really wanted to dig into it deeper.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the subject lines, I think you brought up a really good point, right? Like, people straight away, just by looking at the subject line, they're like, is this important or is this not? Is this business, like promotional, or is this personal, right? And so that is literally where the game is played on that decision that they need to make, right? Is this promotional or is this personal? Is this for me, right? And so what you want to do is you want to look at the patterns that all promotional emails have in common, right? And you want to look as much like not that, right, as possible. And so you might think, well, this does not look promotional, but if everyone is doing it because it doesn't look promotional, then that is promotional, right? So be aware of that. Like there's so many nuances here. But if everyone is trying to not look promotional and they're using the exact same thing, like be aware of that as well, right? And so if everyone is using like first name something, right, then switch it up a bit. Nowadays, I like to keep it. I mean, there's a few things, right? Like in regards to characters, you want to keep it between 15, 20 max. You want to keep it short, right? Ideally, obviously include their name, but the main thing for me is you want to spark that curiosity enough to get them to open the email, but not enough to get them to know that there's an offer inside, right? And so a big mistake that I see agency owners make is like they're either too negatives, so like, hey, you're leaving this much money on the table, right? Like no one is chasing negative emotions. Why do you think they want to open that email? If anything, they want to literally run away from that email as much as possible. I'm sure you guys have felt this feeling where like you're literally running away from all the negative shit in your life and you don't even want to open something because it's going to be negative, right? As whether it's a Slack message or an email or some WhatsApp from a friend, right? And because as humans, we're chasing those positive emotions. So stay away from the negative, right? Instead, build that curiosity with value. Like for example, hey, I don't know, here's something for you, or I might want to check this out, or whatever it is, right? Again, don't use those because don't use them. Like that's kind of like a pattern, right? But essentially, spark curiosity. Don't be negative, right? And don't be like too straight up. Like, hey, here's an offer for you, or partnership opportunity with all that shit. It's just going to junk. So it should look like something that a friend would send you. Ask yourself, if I was sending this to a friend, would I write like this? Would I write this subject line, or would I be so much more casual? Make sense? So that's kind of the subject line that I go for.
For sure. And I mean, I think you touched on the second one quite well when you mentioned the characters. But in terms of the first question, what I was really getting at is the importance of testing, right? So knowing that you're not going to get it right the first time, and knowing that, to get to that 90% open rate, it's going to take a ladder, right? And you're not going to get there straight away. You're not going to hit those metrics straight away. But yeah, any thoughts on like testing different ones, seeing
100%. I mean, that's such a good point. I think like the easiest way people lose is just by not testing. They're like, oh, this should be right, thus I'm going to try it. Then they don't get the result and they either give up or like they're like, this platform doesn't work. No, it's just because you fucking didn't split test shit, right? So yeah, it's all in the split test. And obviously you can take stuff that you're learning here and then you can avoid like months and potentially years of testing and split testing. But even then, like you want to test what you're testing, right? Like it's all about the split testing game. There's never going to be perfect, and embracing the non-perfection at first and embracing that you constantly have to iterate and test new things is what makes you really, really good at this whole game of outreach, right? Because I can show you like, and as much as you might think, well, am I always going to be testing? You will also find just the sweet spot where it just resonates with the market, and that is blissful. So you'll still have to test, but you know what the market resonates with, and things just become so effortless, right? But at the start, you don't know that, so you gotta split test a lot, because your sub niche is specific and all that stuff. So I mean, the game is not the whole game, but like a big chunk of the game is in that split testing.
100%. And I mean, just to really hammer home the point, like if you're sending 50 emails and your open rate is horrible for those 50, if you keep the subject lines the same for 1,000 emails, your open rate is still going to be horrible for 1,000 emails, right? So it's
so many people focus on the output, right? They're like, how many emails should I be sending out? Like, dude, output is important, right? But only when you have a winning formula behind it. It's kind of like the same way that you wouldn't scale your ad spend for your clients if something is not working properly at a small scale, right? When you scale something that is not working at a small scale, it only brings more chaos, right? Now, when you scale something that is really, really working at a very small scale and you scale it up, it's still going to work at a bigger scale. It's going to invite a bunch of chaos. So it's not going to be as perfect as a small scale. So you can test new things at a bigger scale, but you have much more chance of having it work at a big scale. My point is, I think I'm not sure if we're going to talk about this when we talk about call to actions, but like people just focus on the open rate, right? Like that's usually not, or the output, right? Like look at your click-through rate, right? Like how many people are taking action on these emails. I could send out 10 emails and get more meetings booked than someone who's sending out 1,000 emails without a clue, right? On an irresistible offers, on something that actually works, right? And so it's not about output. It's not even about open rate sometimes, right? Because you could be sending out 1,000 emails, right? And you could be getting 90% open rate. But here I come with, and then get like 1 meeting booked. But then I could send out 10 emails with same open rate and then get like 5 meetings booked, just because I understand how an irresistible offer works and because I know the needs and wants of my market. Makes sense? So yeah, 100%. It's not just about the output and the number behind those emails.
I think that leads on very nicely to the final thing we were getting into, which is, the metrics, right? Because of course the open rate is really what's going to get them to go on to read your offer or your email in general. But once they get there, there's other stuff to look into, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, again, like from your experience, what have you seen that people really do wrong when it comes to looking at their metrics and seeing how they can improve based on those?
Yeah, so a really good question. The main one is the one we just talked about, which is the output component, right? They focus way too much on output without focusing enough on split testing and looking at what's coming back, right? Obviously, you need output for that initial split test to really get data, right? Because if you're not getting output, then you're not getting data. But then, so people just focus on that, right? Then the other mistake is, okay, people look at the open rates, but like, are you testing different irresistible offers within those emails? How good is your offer, right? How good, and if your click-through rate sucks, meaning the amount of people that take action on that email sucks, right? Then what things are you changing up, right? If the offer sucks, it probably has to do with, if the click-through rate sucks, it probably has to do with the offer, right? It could be also with your copy in the email, right? So maybe your hook is not intense enough, right? It doesn't get them to read the rest of the email. So understanding what, things to look at and then what things affect that, right? If your open rate is not good, then it's probably your subject line or it's probably your deliverability, right? So maybe your email score sucks because maybe you haven't done the email health checks, right? We talk about this extensively on in the mentorship, right? Like getting your DKIM and your DMARC done, but also understanding that, like, you got to build up, right, to those numbers. You got to get custom domains. You have to make sure that you build that email authority and play to the things that Gmail and other email services actually enjoy, right? So it's a mixture of number one, looking at a bunch of different data, not just open rate, click-through rate, right? And then when you and then obviously how many people take the action, and then when you dissect those data points, understanding, okay, what things affect these data points, right? Once you have the things that affect the data points, then you start split testing one at a time. Your offer and your email copy for your click-through rate and your how many people take action. For your subject line, for your open rate, your subject line, your email deliverability. So I think it's like a mixture of things that it's a mixture, right? Is people not understanding like what things are connected, and also just people completely blinded to the fact that you need to look at the metrics that are coming back.
For sure. I mean, I think you covered everything quite extensively there, but just like on words on how to improve, it's just like, would you say split testing is what it comes down to? Really like figuring out what works and then scaling what does, and not just trying to increase output on stuff that isn't working already?
I think that's like a big chunk, right? But the other big chunk I would say is like you need to have something that the market wants, right? And it comes back to, I mean, we should probably do a whole masterclass on irresistible offers. And if you guys want that, just leave a 1 in the comments. But if you don't have an irresistible offer, like you can split test all you want, right? But if you're not getting crystal clear on what the market wants and understanding your market, and you haven't done the upfront work to have that type of offer, then it's just going to be hard, So I think it's a mixture of both, right? Like number one, having that irresistible offer, having done the upfront work to really understand those people and to really understand the audience. I know you got to go, but also then split testing the right stuff, right? And being mindful of all this stuff. I think people just think that they're going to send out a bunch of emails and they're just going to hit the jackpot. And I think, luckily, like it's much more fun than that, right? It's much more interesting than that.
100%. If it were easy, anyone would do it, right?
Yeah, it's I like to say that it's simple, but it's not easy. Nothing is easy in life that is worth working towards.